Wow. Quite an incredible story. Congratulations to both of our honorees, and now we want to pay tribute to two exemplary people who cannot be with us in person tonight. Last year, we presented the Outstanding Public Service Award to attorney and lifelong advocate for veterans, Gordon Earthspammer. Gordy, as he was known to us, was a legal trailblazer for veterans. He was devoted to fighting injustice. I was honored to introduce him and to meet him last year at this very reception to recognize his important work. And I'm sure everybody knows that Gordy died a few weeks ago from brain cancer. The major leagues of veterans law is short one outstanding pitcher because of Gordy's passing, but we know he's here with us in spirit this evening. We honor tonight his work and his service to our nation's veterans. If you could join me in recognizing Gordy with a round of applause. I know nobody in this room needs to be told that sometimes it's just not fair, but boy, it's just not fair. NVLSP lost another friend this year in former Congressman Lane Evans of Illinois, who knew Gordy and was a member of the House of Representatives, perhaps the House member most responsible for getting Congress to enact the landmark Veterans Judicial Review Act of 1988. Congressman Evans was the ranking member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee. He was a Marine Corps veteran and a well-known advocate for our troops and their families on Capitol Hill, where he also worked collaboratively with NVLSP. Dennis King, a former congressional staff member, is going to come to the podium and share with us about some of his thoughts about the late Congressman's groundbreaking work for our veterans. If you would please recognize Dennis King.
Thank you, Jake. And thank you to the board and the staff here for NVLSP for giving me this opportunity to speak in the memory of our great friend and my boss, Congressman Lane Evans. I know that if Lane were still in Congress, he would have been telling me for a number of weeks how much he was looking forward to being here. I met Lane 40 years ago when we were both first-year students at Georgetown Law Center. I had the same impression of Lane that I'm sure his new colleagues in the House of Representatives had of him just 8 years later. What's a nice guy like you doing in a place like this? So many of the students there were clearly excited about the opportunity to achieve wealth and status, but Lane was different. He shared with me that he wanted to use his legal education to prepare himself for public service through elective office and to use that career on behalf of those he cared about, the hardworking people he grew up with in Rock Island, Illinois, and those who served our country alongside him in the United States Marine Corps. Lane was always sure of himself, but he never thought he knew it all. He always was listening, learning, and growing. In the fall of 1975, Lane and I started volunteering on weekends for the Fred Harris for President campaign. While Fred didn't get the nomination, his populism attracted an incredibly talented group of people. In that environment, I saw Lane transform from a low-key, humble guy to a man of incredible passion and commitment. He dropped out of law school for a semester to serve the campaign through the primaries. Even in defeat, Lane learned how to run and win elections. Upon his return, Lane interned at a legal clinic run by David Addlestone and with a legal team led by Bart Stitchman, which had just merged the efforts of the National Military Discharge Review Project and the resources of Georgetown Law Center. During the time they worked to reform the military discharge system, Lane became lifelong friends with David and Bart. Beyond that, Lane figured out that when he did return as a congressman, they could form an unbeatable team, combining legal know-how, political acumen, and unceasing devotion to effect revolutionary change in how our government and our nation serve those who have served us so well. When Lane entered Congress in 1983, he was eager to implement his comprehensive agenda for veterans. Then a bipartisan reality hit. There was a Democratic VA committee chairman who did not understand the emerging needs of a new generation of veterans, and there was a GOP administration that unfortunately was downright hostile to meeting the needs of those veterans. Lane did perceive that change was beginning to come. He came under the wing of such stalwarts as Tom Daschle, Tom Harkin, Dave Bonnier, and Bob Edgar, who were fighting the entrenched powers not only on the committee, but also as members of the Vietnam-era Veterans in Congress caucus. They taught him much about effective advocacy on the Hill, and as they moved on to bigger and better things, they knew that the leadership of this new veterans movement was in good hands with Lane. For 24 years, Lane led the long, hard, and successful fights to obtain recognition and compensation for Agent Orange exposure, research and treatment for those with PTSD and TBIs, for Gulf War illnesses, and for our atomic veterans. He strived to make health care more accessible to all veterans, including those in rural and inner-city areas, and included mental health care in his agenda. His work led to the storefront VA Veterans Centers for Vietnam vets being made permanent and later expanded to welcome all vets with job training and counseling assistance. It led to expanded educational opportunities for veterans and their families, and his work succeeded in opening the doors of opportunity to female and minority veterans, which was so long overdue. In view of this unparalleled record, it's no surprise that bipartisan legislation was introduced last week in both houses of Congress to rename the VA Community-Based Outpatient Clinic in Galesburg, Illinois, for Lane A. Evans. Knowing how loved and respected he was by his colleagues, I'm confident this measure is going to sail through. Lane recognized that the linchpin of protecting these achievements is that right which is supposed to be the most fundamental to our constitutional rights in America, that of judicial review. Lane took up the fight in Congress that was already being led by the NVLSP and the Vietnam Veterans of America to extend this right to veterans with compensation and veterans award claims against the VA. Near the end of Lane's sixth year in Congress in 1988, the coalition he led, along with NVLSP and VVA, succeeded in enacting judicial review into law. A new Court of Appeals for veterans' claims was established to review final adjudications of the VA. Certainly, the measure was a compromise that set a high bar for overturning VA rulings, but some important benchmarks had been set. First, we saw that, assisted by Lane's political clout and savvy, determined groups like NVLSP could advocate successfully for a more equitable system for veterans. We showed that in addition to the strong legal arguments made, the moral case that veterans should be entitled to the same day in court accorded groups such as undocumented aliens, state and federal prisoners, resonated with a broader veterans community and indeed the general public. We also showed that we had the pragmatism to accept a compromise and knew we could build on our successes to win future battles. In short, we established ourselves as forces to be reckoned with. Lane went on to continue his service through 2006, including 10 years as ranking member of the VA committee, until the Parkinson's disease with which he had struggled for over a decade made it impossible to continue. He did hate to give up the job. He felt that he was quitting on all those who were counting on him. Lane was wrong about that. His work continues through all those he taught and inspired, and as long as we continue to follow his example and spread his lessons to those around us, Lane Evans' work will never be done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for those moving words, for helping us to honor and remember Congressman Evans, who was so important to so many people. We're so grateful you attended the reception this year. When we adjourn in a moment, I would like to ask our award recipients, and Bart Stitchman and Ron Abrams, to meet me here on stage for some photographs. Everyone, it is your generosity, your support, your hard work that make it possible for the National Veterans Legal Services Program to help our veterans and service members and their families. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for the important work you do. Good night.